What happens when a proud landowner is told he doesn't belong on the land he built with his own hands? He stays quiet until the same woman trying to evict him starts paying him rent. What happened in between left the entire courtroom stunned. You ever have one of those mornings where the air just smells like peace? I'm talking birds chirping, the breeze carrying the scent of fresh earth, and your coffee somehow tasting better even though it's the same old store-brand stuff? That was my morning. Just me, my land, my old mutt Winston, and the sound of silence. Not the fake kind you get in the city, but the real kind, the kind you can only hear when you're not surrounded by nonsense. I'd been living in this little corner of Georgia for about 14 months, and I'll be honest, I wasn't trying to bother nobody. Bought myself 5 acres fair and square after I retired early from a career in logistics and IT. That land used to be my grandfather's before it got sold off back in the 80s. Took me almost 20 years to trace it back and buy it again, piece by piece. Rebuilt the fence with my own hands. Cleared the bramble. Planted fig trees. Got a rain barrel system going. Simple living. Real living. So I thought. That morning I was setting up my lemonade stand. Now, don't get me wrong, this wasn't no kiddie operation. I'm talking about a little cart I built from scrap wood and old lawnmower wheels. I'd wheel it to the edge of my land every Saturday. Just a jug of cold homemade lemonade, some fresh peaches from my trees, and a sign, free to good neighbors. That's what made the next part so damn poetic and frustrating. Because that was the morning I met her. Karen. Now, I don't mean just any Karen. I mean the final boss of Karens. Blouse buttoned so tight it could crack under pressure. Sunglasses the size of her entitlement. Driving a brand new SUV that still had the dealership sticker on the back window. She pulled up real slow like she was inspecting a crime scene, not a peaceful property. She stepped out, heels clicking against the gravel like an accusation. "Excuse me," she said, not even blinking. "Are you the owner?" Something about the way she said owner already told me she didn't expect me to be. I wiped my hands on a rag and smiled. "Sure am. Built this all up myself." She gave a tight, polite smile like she'd just bitten into a lemon. "I live across the street," she said, glancing at her house like it was the Taj Mahal. "And I'm president of our HOA. Now let me pause right there. I knew what an HOA was. I did my research. But here's the thing, my land? Not in it. This part of the block wasn't even zoned into their community. Different deed, different rules, different everything. I made sure of it. Still, I offered her a cup of lemonade. Thought maybe if we started off neighborly we'd end that way too. She took it, sniffed it like I'd laced it with bad intentions, and sipped once. Then she put it down like she was offended by citrus. "I'm afraid your little operation here isn't up to code." I laughed. Out loud. Because it was either that or burst a vein in my forehead. "Up to whose code?" I asked, still holding the ladle. She reached into her bag and pulled out a clipboard. I kid you not, a real, actual clipboard with laminated pages. Started rattling off nonsense about lawn maintenance ordinances, architectural harmony, prohibited structures, even the defensive nature of livestock sounds. "Now I'll admit the chickens do cluck early. But that's nature. Not a noise complaint. I'm going to need you to cease all non-conforming activities immediately," she said, already turning back to her car. I stared at her taillights. Felt the lemonade in my belly go sour. That was the first shot across the bow. The next week, I noticed small things. My mailbox got knocked over. My rain barrel system mysteriously disconnected. Someone left a printout on my porch of HOA bylaws, none of which applied to me, by the way. Then came the petition. A handful of folks I'd waved to every morning, same ones who once asked me to fix their fences and watch their dogs, now had their names on some document claiming my land was decreasing neighborhood value. One neighbor, old Mrs. Pendleton, actually apologized when I caught her slipping it in my gate. "They came by 3 times, she whispered. She said I wouldn't be able to renew my pool pass if I didn't sign. I nodded. Didn't say a word. Just took the paper, folded it once, and tossed it in the fire pit. Then came the notice. Typed in official-sounding font, delivered in a plain envelope. Said I had 90 days to vacate the premises for non-compliance with community architectural standards. Signed, you guessed it, by Karen and her merry band of HOA vigilantes. I laughed so hard I had to sit down. Because this was next-level fiction. Except it wasn't funny when a truck pulled up 2 days later and dropped off a cease and desist sign right at the edge of my property. Hammered into the dirt like they were claiming territory. I tore it down the same night. What made it all worse was the way she'd smile at me across the street. You know the type. That, "I know something you don't know" grin. Like she believed her clipboard gave her the divine right to bully anyone who didn't match her landscaping vision. And trust me, I tried everything polite. I went to the township office, showed them the deeds. They nodded, said I was good. Went to the zoning board. Same answer. Even called a lawyer friend from Savannah who laughed and said, "Man, they're trying to scare you." But still, every week, more letters. More inspections. More garbage mysteriously showing up near my fence line. One morning, I caught two teenagers spray painting "NO Farmers" across my toolshed. They ran off when they saw me, but I recognized one of them. Karen's nephew. Real estate student. Real piece of work. By week 6, I wasn't sleeping. It wasn't just the nonsense. It was the principle. I worked my whole life. I paid my taxes. Never asked for favors. Built this place with sweat and splinters. And now this woman, who's been here all of 10 minutes, thinks she can erase it all with a stack of forms and a Botox smile? No. That night, I sat out on the porch with Winston, sipping lemonade that had more bite than usual. "You feel that?" I said to him. He just wagged his tail. "That's the feeling of a storm brewing." Because if Karen thought I was just gonna pack up and roll out, she had another thing coming. But first, I needed to do what every good neighbor does. Dig deeper. To be continued. What happened next changed everything. You don't want to miss how this fight turned real. And real fast. I used to think the worst kind of neighbor was the one who borrowed your tools and never gave them back. Turns out I was wrong. The worst kind is the one who never steps foot on your property, but still acts like they own it. Let me tell you how I found that out. I woke up early that morning, before the sun had even stretched its arms. Just like every day. Fed Winston, made my usual mug of strong black coffee, and stepped out onto the porch, ready to get my hands dirty. And then I froze. My front gate was gone. Not just damaged. Not just leaning sideways after a windstorm. It was gone. Ripped out of the ground like it never existed. Fence torn apart with scattered like bones. A whole section missing like someone took a bite out of my land and didn't even bother to clean up after themselves. Now, I'm not the kind of man who jumps to conclusions. But sometimes the conclusion jumps straight at you, no warning. I didn't have to see her face. Didn't have to hear her shrill little laugh or see her marching across the street with her designer dog and matching entitlement. No, I just knew. Every nerve in my body knew. Karen did this. Let me be clear. This wasn't some kind of teenage prank or a freak storm. This was surgical. Intentional. Someone took the time to come onto my land, dismantle a fence I had built with my own damn hands, and leave nothing but a message. That message was simple. You don't belong here. I stood there in my slippers, mug still in hand, staring at the damage. I didn't curse, didn't yell, just felt something shift inside me. Something that had been holding its breath for weeks, maybe even months. I went back inside, opened my laptop, and filed a police report online. Uploaded pictures, listed every detail. They sent me a confirmation number and an automated reply. Your report has been received. A representative will contact you shortly. That shortly turned into 3 days. When the call finally came, it was from a guy named Sergeant Jackson. Polite voice, slightly bored tone. The kind that says he's already dealt with 5 car break-ins and a barking dog complaint before lunch. "Mr. Brown," he said, "we reviewed your report. Unfortunately, there's no clear evidence to support intentional property damage. No eyewitnesses. No surveillance footage. Nothing that definitively identifies a suspect." I blinked. "There are tire marks in my yard," I told him. "You can literally see where someone backed in to tear the fence out." "Yes, sir. But that's not conclusive." "Not conclusive?" I repeated. What would be conclusive? A confession signed in glitter pen. He chuckled nervously, then went quiet. "I understand your frustration." "No, you don't," I thought. "You get to hang up and go back to your desk. I get to fix my fence for the second time in 2 months because a woman who doesn't own this land thinks she owns me." Then came HOA's next gift, Craig Donner. Now, if you've never met a man whose face looks like it was carved out of beige disappointment, let me introduce you to Craig. He wore a suit 2 sizes too big and carried a briefcase that was probably empty but made him feel important. He didn't shake my hand. Didn't even smile. just stood at the edge of my driveway and declared, "Mr. Brown, we've received several complaints regarding the visual condition of your property." I looked around. My grass was trimmed. My tool shed freshly painted. Even the compost piles were covered and labeled. "You allergic to vegetables or something?" I asked. "Because that's the only thing growing here that could be considered offensive." He didn't blink. "Your property violates the aesthetic standards of our community. It's been noted that your structures are inconsistent with the architectural integrity outlined in the HOA guidelines." I took a step forward, calm but sharp. "I'm not in your HOA. My land's outside your jurisdiction. Different zoning. I have the deed and the plat maps to prove it." He handed me a folder anyway. Inside, a petition for forced acquisition of my property, signed by a dozen neighbors, including, of course, Karen O.L. entitled herself. That night, I burned the petition in my fire pit. Not out of anger, out of clarity. Because when someone shows you who they are, you better believe them. And this little crusade wasn't about rules. It wasn't about neighborhood harmony. It was about control. It was about sending a message. You don't look like us. You don't live like us. So you don't belong here. The final straw? A dead fish in a plastic bag left on my front porch with a handwritten note that read, "Maybe this fits your farm aesthetic." The smell hit me before I even opened the door. Winston barked like he was about to take somebody's leg off. I didn't call the police. I didn't yell across the street. I didn't post angry rants online. I walked inside, pulled out an old dusty storage box marked inheritance, and laid it out on the kitchen table. Inside were deeds, maps, water rights, tax records, everything my grandfather and father ever touched in relation to this land. It was all there. Because my family didn't just buy this land. We built it. We earned it. And no HOA, no clipboard, no smug smirk was going to erase that. I spent the next week collecting everything. Digitizing documents. Organizing files. Making calls. I reached out to a zoning attorney. Filed official complaints with the county. Set up cameras around the property. And then I did something else. I made it public. I wrote my story. I shared it. No anger. Just truth. I talked about how neighborhoods become battlegrounds when people confuse privilege with power. How some folks think rules only apply to others. How black folks who own land, real, generational land, still get treated like squatters on their own soil. And the response? It was louder than Karen's SUV. People from all over the county, hell, from all over the country started reaching out. Sharing their own HOA horror stories. Offering support. Sending advice. Even donations for legal help, though I politely declined. I didn't need money. I needed respect. This wasn't just about offense. This was about dignity. About legacy. About standing up when the world keeps trying to sit you down. This is the turning point. Everything you've been waiting for, it's here. Stick around to see how I took the fight right back to their front porch. There comes a moment, and I mean a real, gritty, soul-deep moment, when you realize you're done asking for decency. You're done waiting on respect. You stop knocking on the front door and start building your own damn house next to it, brick by brick, no permission needed. That moment came for me right after the fish incident. You remember that, right? The rotting fish in a bag on my porch like it was some kind of HOA welcome package. Cute. After that little stunt, I realized this wasn't about property lines anymore. This was about principle. And I don't lose sleep over fences, but I'll burn daylight defending my name. I started moving different. First thing I did was call up Marion Taylor, a land use attorney from Atlanta. Older brother, sharp as a tack, voice smooth like a Sunday sermon, but legal mind like a buzzsaw. We sat in his office for 3 hours. I laid everything out. Deeds. Photos. Letters. Timeline. Even the petition Karen cooked up with her HOA buddies. Marion took one look at the mess and said, "Brother Brown, I hope she likes paperwork 'cause she's about to drown in it." He pulled out a legal pad and started drafting 3 separate filings. Cease and desist. Civil harassment. Petition to establish boundary protections and property rights. I asked him if that was overkill. He raised an eyebrow. "You ever try reasoning with a skunk?" "Exactly." Next stop was City Hall. Now let me explain something. Most folks think the city's just a bunch of bored people with stamps and forms. And most of the time, they're right. But when you walk in with documentation, a sharp suit, and the fire of 1,000 wrongs behind your voice, things shift. I sat down with the zoning board clerk, Ms. Ramirez, a tough, no-nonsense woman with reading glasses she wore like a badge of honor. I laid out the proof. My land was never part of the HOA zone. Never had a vote, never signed an agreement, never accepted their so-called standards. It was grandfathered farmland, legally exempt from all HOA enforcement. She looked through the documents, eyes narrowing. Why are they even bothering you? She asked, flipping a notarized page. Because I didn't ask their permission to exist, I said. Now while I was out building a legal fortress, Karen was putting on a show. She started hosting emergency HOA meetings on her lawn like she was running for suburban governor. You should have seen it, chairs neatly arranged in a circle, matching clipboards for her followers, a big chalkboard that said, "Neighborhood harmony begins with boundaries." Oh, the irony. And let me tell you, every time I passed by, she'd pause her little speech, tilt her sunglasses down just enough to glare, then turn back to her flock and say something like, "And of course, we all know what happens when certain people disregard rules." Now she never said my name, she didn't have to. Her words were dipped in venom and aimed straight at my porch. Then came the code enforcement letters. 3 in 1 week. Unapproved agricultural structure, my compost bin. Visual nuisance due to livestock equipment, a wheelbarrow. Non-conforming landscape items, a scarecrow I made with my niece. It was comedy. Tragic comedy. I called the city again, and even the clerk sounded exhausted. "Mr. Brown, we've received 14 anonymous complaints in 10 days. All from the same address. Let me guess, 1207 Magnolia Drive. Karen's Castle." At this point, even the city was starting to get tired of her theatrics. Then came the day that flipped the whole game. I was fixing the gate again when I heard tires screech on the street behind me. I turned around and saw a sleek black car pull up. Out stepped a woman in heels sharp enough to cut glass, briefcase in hand, attitude in her stride. "Mr. Brown?" she asked. "Depends who's asking." Avery Dunn, Channel 5 Investigative. Now I'm not one for the spotlight. But I'm also not about to pass up the chance to speak truth on camera when someone offers the mic. Turns out Karen had tried her stunt with 2 other property owners in the past. One sold out cheap. The other moved. But I had receipts. And now I had the media. Avery followed me around my land. Filmed the garden, the toolshed, the tire marks where the fence was destroyed. Interviewed me right there on my porch. I kept it respectful. Didn't shout. Didn't throw names. Just told the truth. They want to police my lawn, my shed, my fence. But they don't see the labor behind it. The legacy behind it. By the time that story aired, it hit like thunder. Neighbors who never made eye contact suddenly waved from their porches. Local church leaders called to check in. Even Ms. Pendleton, the one who once slid a petition under my gate, came by with a homemade pie and an apology. "I didn't know it had gone this far," she said. "I didn't rub it in. Didn't need to. Because the shift had already started." And Karen? Oh, she didn't like that one bit. I came home 2 days later to find a massive banner stretched across her driveway. "Protect our neighborhood values." Underneath it, a card table full of fresh printed pamphlets that said, "Stop community decay, take back our streets." It was pitiful. I walked by with Winston on the leash. She spotted me and her whole face tightened. "Enjoying your little 15 minutes?" she snapped. I stopped, turned, looked her dead in the eye. 15 minutes? I said, "Ma'am, this is my land. My time doesn't expire." But here's the part she didn't see coming. Marion, my lawyer, called me with a smile in his voice. "They crossed the line," he said. "And now we're filing." Turns out one of those HOA letters had a forged line, a signature that didn't match any official records. And if there's one thing legal courts hate more than harassment, it's fraud. I gave Marion the green light. Let them scramble. Let them print new pamphlets. Let them have another lawn meeting with finger sandwiches and fake smiles. I was done dancing around. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about everyone who's ever been told they don't belong on land they paid for, worked for, inherited, protected. It was about drawing the line, not just in the dirt, but in the law. Next, you'll see what happens when the tables turn. Stay with me, this final chapter is something you'll want to see unfold in real time. There's a difference between winning and being heard. One is temporary. The other sticks with people. Makes them think twice next time they try to roll over somebody just because they think they can. I didn't just want to win. I wanted them to remember why they lost. The first court date was set for a Tuesday. It was humid, the kind of air that makes your shirt cling to your back before you've even locked your front door. I wore a pressed navy suit and my father's watch, the one with the scuffed leather strap he never replaced. As I stepped into the courthouse, I wasn't just carrying folders and files. I was carrying legacy. Generations of labor, sacrifice, and sweat equity. The quiet kind of power that doesn't need headlines to matter. Karen walked in 10 minutes late. Lipstick too loud for the room. A printed scarf tied like a badge of honor. She was flanked by Craig Donner and some HOA lawyer with a briefcase shinier than his shoes. You could practically smell the smug on them. They sat across from us like they were starring in a courtroom drama full of fake concern and whispered objections. But the judge? Oh, the judge was sharp. His name was Judge Colton. Older black man. Eyes like steel, voice like Sunday morning radio. You could tell from his first 5 minutes on the bench that he didn't suffer fools or phonies. Marion, my attorney, laid it out with precision. Showed the deeds. Explained the zoning exceptions. Brought up the surveillance footage of Karen's nephew trespassing. Even pulled out a digital copy of the forged signature from one of the fake HOA complaints. That last one? That was the nail in the proverbial coffin. Judge Colton leaned forward, looking at the HOA attorney like a disappointed uncle. Did your client knowingly file false documentation with intent to intimidate a private landowner? You could hear a pin drop. The HOA attorney tried to tap dance around it, but the room wasn't having it. Marion stayed calm, that cool, practiced calm that tells you the fight was already over before it began. Then it was Karen's turn. She stood up, eyes wide, voice sugary, and launched into her monologue. I was only trying to preserve the beauty of our neighborhood. We have rules. Standards. We have a way of life that people expect when they move in. She turned to the judge and said something I'll never forget. He doesn't fit the neighborhood's vision. The whole room froze. Even the stenographer looked up from her keyboard. Judge Colton straightened in his chair and said, without raising his voice, Miss O'Eldridge, let me remind you, this courtroom is governed by the law, not by your vision. Boom. The ruling came 2 hours later. Full dismissal of the HOA's claim. Cease and desist against Karen and the HOA for harassment. Monetary penalties for property damage, legal fees, and emotional distress. A requirement for HOA representatives, including Karen, to take a course on civil boundary laws and property rights. And the cherry on top? Judge Colton offered an option to settle one of the claims, the one involving Karen personally, if she agreed to a structured settlement. You know what that meant? Karen now pays me rent. Let me say that again for the folks in the back. The same woman who tried to evict me from my land now cuts me a check every month as part of a court-ordered settlement tied to undue hardship, intimidation, and trespass-related disruptions. She doesn't mail it herself, of course. Her lawyer's office handles that now. But I smile every time I see that envelope. That check doesn't just cover legal fees. It fertilizes my garden, feeds Winston, and funds the little agricultural workshops I started hosting for the local kids every Saturday. Funny how things turn around. The same neighbors who once signed that petition now wave from their driveways. One even came by last weekend with his grandson to learn how to plant collard greens. Even Ms. Pendleton drops off extra eggs when her hens lay heavy. Community didn't die out here, it just needed reminding. As for Karen? Well, she still lives across the street. But that neighborhood watch sign she used to flash like a badge? It's gone. The chalkboard meeting stopped. No more pamphlets. No more flyers. Last I saw her, she was trimming her hedges alone, glancing over at my porch every few minutes like she was waiting for something. I just gave her a polite nod and went back to tending my tomatoes. You see, the thing about land is this, it remembers. Every footprint, every seed, every swing of the hammer. It doesn't care about your title, your HOA status, or how many bylaws you can recite. It cares about the hands that shape it. And these hands? They belong here. Always have. Always will. So if someone ever tells you that you don't belong somewhere you built with your own 2 hands, you look them square in the eye and say, then you better learn how rent works.